China's electric car boom has pushed the demand for oil worldwide off a cliff. Experts are saying over the next few years, we're going to see massive losses from a lot of these companies: BP, Chevron, Saudi, Aramco, China's own oil company. They're even predicting this. China's own oil company is trying to pivot into renewable energy because they're saying, well, we know what's happening. We know that by far the largest market in the world, the largest by a mile when it comes to demand for petrol engines, for cars in general. 32 million cars are sold every year in China, and those cars now are moving away from gasoline. Experts are saying this is going to cause enormous structural problems, demand problems for gasoline and for oil. And they've already passed that tipping point. Many believe we have gone past peak oil. Here's the numbers. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to have you with us. The ProgressPlaybook.com says that China's EV boom has pushed gasoline demand off a cliff. Now, here in Australia, it's difficult for most Australians to understand this idea because, you know, most cars you see here on Australian roads and on American roads, most of the time you see cars and they're powered by gasoline, primarily by petrol. So in our minds, we sort of think, well, I'm seeing this, so therefore this must be true. But it's actually not the case at all, because we only represent at least Australia anyway, only represent a tiny percentage of the world's population. So what people drive on Australian roads or on the roads in New Zealand or on the roads in even, the UK, for example, doesn't really affect things as much as we think it does. What does make an effect, a huge effect, is when, the country with nearly the world's largest population, but by far the world's largest car market by a mile, moves away from internal combustion at an incredible pace. And this year, around 55% of all cars sold in China have been electric. From Tesla chargers in the ancient alleys that surround the Forbidden City in Beijing to lonely highway rest stops with charging ports in the western deserts, signs of the electrification of China's transport fleet and the demise of gasoline are everywhere. New 1,000 kilowatt fast chargers installed by BYD, 900 kilowatt chargers installed by Zeekr, and even many other Chinese car brands that are now capable of charging their cars in 5 to 10 minutes. Those charging stations are popping up everywhere. And people who previously thought, well, I need gasoline, now realize that's not the case. Chinese sales of electric cars and hybrids have reached a tipping point, they did early last year, in their tug of war with internal combustion engines. They've accounted for more than half of retail passenger sales over the past 10 months in China, according to the China Passenger Car Association, a trend that's poised to send appetite for transport fuels, for oil, into a decline that will have an enormous impact on the global oil market. This may impact your 501. You got your 501k, guys, your superannuation. You've got to check this, because if your super is heavily invested into oil companies or companies linked to oil companies, then you're going to see a massive decrease in the value of those stocks over the next 5 years. The more rapid than expected uptake of EVs globally has shifted views among oil forecasters at energy majors, banks, and academics in recent months. Unlike in the US and Europe, where peaks in consumption were followed by long plateaus, the drop in demand in the world's top crude importer, China, is expected to be much more pronounced, and this will never be reversed. Brokerage CITIC Futures Company sees Chinese gasoline consumption dropping by 4 to 5% a year through 2030, whereas China's own oil company, one of the biggest in the world, believes demand will drop by 10% per year. The future is coming faster in China, said Ciaran Healy, an oil analyst at the International Energy Agency in Paris. What we're seeing now is the medium-term expectations coming ahead of schedule, and that has implications for the shape of Chinese and global demand growth through the rest of the decade. For a global oil market which has come to rely on China as its main growth driver for most of this century, that will erode an enormous pillar of consumption. The country now accounts for about 1/5 of worldwide oil demand, and gasoline makes up about 1/4 of that. The prospect of a sharp drop from transport is coming on top of tepid industrial consumption due to slowing economic growth. The growing popularity of electric trucks, as well as those that run on liquefied natural gas, is also weighing on demand for diesel. China's consumption of the fuel peaked in 2019 and will drop around 5% a year all the way through to 2030 and onwards from that, said UBS Securities Company. Now, demand for diesel worldwide is slowing for that reason, but it's also slowing because not just China, it's slowing because of demand in Australia, in Europe, in many countries around the world. People are moving away from diesel. It's a very, very massive pollutant. It causes cancer. And the reality is there's much better options now. We're seeing vehicles like the BYD Shark disrupt the main market for diesel, pickup trucks. And we're also seeing that hybrid pickup trucks are definitely a better choice. And buyers are saying, well, why would I want this crappy diesel pickup truck? It's very low in power. It's very loud, stinks, it's expensive to run when I can get a plug-in hybrid. So this decline in demand for diesel won't just come from China. It's coming from everywhere. There are still a lot of unknowns about how China's uptake of EVs will play out and just how fast it'll be. Will it be over by 2027, as I predict? Will it take until 2030? But the future is very clear. Demand for oil will continue to decline interminably. What does that mean about the future of the planet when it comes to oil? Well, yes, we do need oil. There's no question. But demand will decrease enormously when the entire global fleet moves away from internal combustion engines. Now, that may take longer to arrive. That may take 10 years. It may take 12 years, but it unquestionably will happen. Whether full electrification can be achieved by 2030 or 2035, and what that will mean for fuel demand sparks some questions. But another question mark surrounds plug-in hybrid vehicles, which can be powered by electricity or backup gasoline engines. They've accounted for much of the sales growth over the past few years. But there's little data on the extent to which the drivers of these cars still rely on motor fuel. But most people believe that as a result of some of the new plug-in hybrids, which are capable of doing 200 kilometers or about 130 miles on EV power alone, that actually plug-in hybrids will contribute to the massive decline in demand for oil. The IEA sees rampant mass market electrification potentially pushing China's gasoline demand down again in 2026 after it goes down for the first time ever in 2025. That will result in an average annual drop of around 2.4% from 2023 through to 2030. Others, like CITC, see a more rapid retreat. Improvements in fuel efficiency and peak in car ownership would help drive the declines along with the uptake of electric cars. This year is a turning point for China's refined oil market, with gasoline consumption peaking before declining rapidly, said Lu Yantao, a senior engineer with the PetroChina Planning and Engineering Institute, part of China's biggest oil company. And he said this month on PetroChina's website. PetroChina, China's largest oil company, is predicting demand for oil will drop rapidly over the next 5 years, 10 years. But in 20 years' time, demand could shrink by as much as 70%. The amount of gasoline-powered cars on the road would peak as early as next year. So China's largest oil company is saying that the amount of gasoline-powered cars on the road will peak this year. They were referring to 2025. They're saying peak internal combustion is already here. And now we're going to see what's happening in one of the largest states in China, where that state, approximately 60% of all cars on the road, as in the car fleet on that road, that state has 68 million people. More than 60% of the cars on the roads in that state are electric. And they're saying this is going to happen across the rest of China within the next 5 years. Beijing planted the seeds for the transition to EVs more than a decade ago, offering subsidies that give automakers time to scale up output and lower their costs. And at this point in time, it's working because electric cars now are often cheaper than internal combustion. It began to pay off in 2021 when output of new energy vehicle shipments nearly tripled from the previous year. And they are now primed to surpass the 10 million mark. And they are now primed to surpass the 13 to 14 million mark for the first time ever in 2024. In fact, some analysts believe that this year, electric car sales could hit 16 million in China, meaning that more than 50% of all cars sold this year will be electric. 2026, demand will increase by approximately 25%, meaning by 2027, it's very possible 90% of all cars being sold will be electric. New energy vehicles make up about 12% of all cars on the road right now in China. That's expected to exceed 25% by 2027 and could approach 100% in the 2030s. The country's oil demand from light vehicles will fall from around 3.5 million barrels a day at the moment to only 1 million and potentially less by 2040, said the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. Now, going from 3.5 million barrels a day to 1 million, best case scenario, shows that this will have a dramatic effect on the valuation, the book value of oil companies. China's path towards electrification is faster than in other economies. In the US, EVs still represent only around 10% of total car sales. However, in Europe this year, electric car sales have risen starkly by more than 30%. Gasoline consumption, though, has fallen just 12% in the US from a peak in 2004. However, hybrid vehicles are poised to make a staggering comeback, or not necessarily a comeback, but a staggering rise in sales this year and next year in the United States, along with increased EV consumption, which will bring oil consumption down in the United States as well. China's drop in gasoline demand due to its aggressive electric car rollout is completely unique in some respects, the IEA's Healy said. I don't think there's a country that has the comparable profile. However, it's worth keeping in mind, by 2035, internal combustion engine sales will be banned in Europe. Now, Europe is the third largest auto market in the world behind the United States. And considering around 15 million cars are sold in Europe every year, if it will no longer be legal to sell internal combustion cars in 2035, while oil demand in Europe will drastically plummet then as well. What does this mean for the future? Well, I think it means good things are coming. Reduced oil demand is going to be a big bonus in terms of the pollution we see in the air and in terms of global warming. It should have an immediate impact on those numbers. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Thanks for watching.